Hey guys, it's a rare Sunday Rahul video, but today the first, I think, real big tournament of the Lost Origin metagame has kind of happened, and if you are heading to Peoria Regionals, which is in a week, this is something you should be paying attention to. A lot of top players participated in something called the Limitless Showdown that happened today. I also participated. I went 3-3 with the Lost Box. Ran into some Weezings and some Empoleons, the hate online, whatever, got drilled out, but the deck is really good. So anyway, today there was about 700 players who participated in a best of one all the way until top cut metagame tournament with Lost Origin. So it's our first real look at what people are considering, some techs and some metagame decisions that might not have been as apparent, and the meta develops, like this is like your week 1, week 2, into finally we're jumping into week 3. This is where the meta kind of breaks into a hole. You get to see a better idea of what players themselves are considering, what the direction or the mindset of players is. Are we trying to deal with Lost Zone too much? Are we trying to ignore it? Like, this is kind of where top players will look and kind of dissect and say, hey, what's being played? What's not being played? What tech cards are being played? What is that spots being taken up for? Can I reliably play a certain deck like this and get away with it? What's the percentage share? These kinds of things is what I would look at personally as a player, starting this week, heading all the way up to Peoria. Yeah, because this is the final week. This is your dawn of your final day. I'm not going to Peoria, like I said before in my other videos, but I'm going to get you guys prepared. So the first thing to do is to look at the meta share of how many decks was played. So Lost Zone Box, which is being differentiated from Giratina. So I assume Lost Zone Box is just something that doesn't have any Giratinas in it. So it could have some combination of like Cramorant, Sableye, like other V Pokemon like Raikou, Crabominable, its own Empoleon, I don't know, Drapion, like those kinds of cards. About 19.88% of the share. That's a pretty big percentage share. And it was about 48.9% win percentage, which I think pretty expected, which is actually pretty good. It's pretty good for how much actually showed up, because you expect it to kind of do worse if that kind of happens. Like a deck this, like, is this popular, then you're saying, okay, then some are going to naturally do well, some are naturally going to do very poorly. It balances out. 83 is Giratina, which is about 13% of our meta share, a similar win percentage, which means about 200, or I guess like 30-something percent of our meta share, 31%, 32%, was Lost Zone Engine, which is kind of crazy to think about because this engine just came out and it's very meta-defining already, you can tell. Kyurem Palkia is one of the new kids on the block, posting a 10% share with a 56% win rate, which is very high, considering that I think anything above 52, 53 is probably really good. Anything below 47, you probably have to like take a step back with how many decks are played and be maybe not, like maybe it was on the lower side of variance, maybe it was on the lower side of performing well, unless there was one list that kind of swept the tournament, potentially won, which we will get to in a sec. So Kyurem Palkia is definitely a deck to not be ignored. Basically, like, Kyurem will show up in some capacity, and the top 3 decks are all brand new decks in the metagame: Lost Zone Box, Giratina, and Kyurem Palkia. So if you're heading to Peoria, you have to be prepared to deal with these, and it's really tough when dealing with Lost Zone Box because you don't know what tech attackers and tech stuff they've got. So start reading up on some of these lists, start getting well versed with it. Click on this, just go through the text, the meta share. Like, if I was to click on this myself, I would go into this, click on cards, and kind of see, like, I would literally try to familiarize myself with as many of these cards as possible to kind of get an idea of what lists are playing what variants, to see, like, maybe I see a Raikou V, maybe I have to expect something like the Zero Aura as well. Like, I like playing around stuff like that. Like, that's kind of what you should be familiarizing yourself with. I mean, obviously it's very tough to do, but it is something that I think if you put the effort in, it will go a long way. Our first returnee is Palkia Inteleon, posting up about an 8% or 10% meta share as well, with a 56% win rate. I think Palkia Inteleon, no stranger to the metagame. Everyone knows that if it went first in a lot of the metagames so far, it's been very favored into a lot of decks, and I think that has not changed thus far. Having one of the most consistent engines in the form of Irida and VIP Pass, as well as Greninja, you are posting up one of the best decks in the format. Just adding, I don't even know what you add to this. Maybe like, yeah, I don't even know what you add to Palkia and Inteleon. Maybe an Empoleon, like an Empoleon or two, just to kind of deal with Lost Box. But besides that, I think it's like a good deck already, Mew Genesect posting a 46% win rate, which is pretty low for a Mew deck, but Mew did win, so we have to give it some credit, and we'll talk about it in a sec. And then we have some of these fringe decks that, after like 40-something decks, like after your top 5, we get the fringe decks with his Hsu and Zorak posting a pretty low win rate. Reggie's posting a pretty high win rate, actually, with 24, so you kind of look at them and see what their matchups were. Hsu and Gudra with 23 which is 3.5% meta share with 43% win rate, which is really low, but there was 2 Gudras in the top 8. So let's talk about that when we get there. Arc Pika, pretty low win rate. Actually about an even win rate with a 2.6% representation. You got to look through the Arc Pikas and see what they're playing. Is their tech attackers? Is it Tina? Is it like Decidueye? Like, what are they doing with their list? You got to think about that. And then Arc Inteleon, a old favorite, making its comeback, posting a 63% win rate, which is absurdly high. So just something to keep note of. And then there's some other decks. You can kind of look through all these and just be like, oh, is this deck good? Is this bad? Maybe there's something spicy here that you can fix. Like Amazing Reshiram, 20% win rate, not great. One guy playing Hisuian Samurai did not have a good day to start off, you know? It's like some of these decks, like our Ice Rider guy went 0-5, not great. You know, like some of these you can just discount and move forward, but maybe there's an idea you see in here that you want to pick up and improvise a little bit more. Like maybe you're a diehard Durant player and you want to just fix that up. So this is what I would start with your percentage shares and looking at what you think Peoria should look like. I think it would emulate this tournament very closely. Now that being said, let's look at the top cut. We saw a Mew V. We're gonna look at the top 8 lists. They're all up here. If you can't see them open already. There's a Mew VMAX list that got first, beating a Hiram in the finals. Arc Inteleon and Dialga getting top 4, which is kind of a shocker seeing Dialga in top 4. I know there's some diehard Dialga fans. Xander Perot, one of my closest friends, is a diehard Dialga friend. Another Paul Inteleon in top 8 with a Lost Zone box, and then 2 Gudras, 1 Arc variant, 1 straight. So our top 8 was 8 different decks like that are fundamentally. And then we dropped to 9th, which was another Paul Inteleon, and then an Arc Inteleon coming in at 10th. 2 more Paul Inteleons rounding out our top 16, as well as 2 Lost Zone boxes, a Vikavolt, which could be an interesting deck that you might be into, and a Giratina. So we do see our Inteleon, like our regular suspects, the Palks and the Arcs, and like these decks coming in. And then we see some of the list stragglers on the bottom half of cut that also made it with Gigas, Blissey, Palkia, and Zoroark. So there's like a bunch of lists that did well, and then you can see the outskirts where like the craziest thing here is the Leafeon, obviously, but everything else is like pretty expected. You see the Lost Zone boxes, you see the Arcs, you see the Palkias, you see the Ice Riders. Like you can kind of see what decks got really close but didn't actually cross that finish line as you get to the standings. Now let's look at Cap Ahab's winning. Wait, did I not open the list? I didn't open the list. Oh my god. Cap Ahab's winning list here. A very stock standard DTE Mew, which has become the new Rage after performing well in the open in the hands of Michael Premont. It has taken over pretty much Baltimore Regionals. Like you saw Baltimore Regionals, pretty much this version of the deck dominated in the Fusion Strike build while doing okay and some making day 2. This build predominantly thrived. The big changes from our regular lists is that someone just plays a copy of Roxanne, which I don't think a couple did in Baltimore. It has a copy of Switching Cart, which is just, I guess, a different way to play Switch. Only 1 copy of Shoes, which is interesting. And then a copy of Lost City to deal with the Drapion, to make sure your opponent doesn't get 2 Drapions, because if they do win Lost Box, you probably lose because they play 3 to 4 Rod. And then there's 1 Path to the Peak to go Path Roxanne, I believe is what Cap Ahab said in his post on Twitter. That Path Roxanne would win them games, but it's weird because I don't want to be Path Roxanning if I'm Mew, because that's also how I lose. So an interesting take on Mew, but this might be our stock standard way to play Mew moving forward, so familiarize yourself with this list. Second place was Kyurem with 2 Empoleon Vs. A little bit of hate coming that way to kind of mitigate, the aggressive nature of these Lost Box decks until we can get set up and we can use cards like the Greninja to kind of just put some hurt on the Lost Box decks. With Lost Vacuum and Choice Belt, we can dish out a lot of damage out of nowhere, kind of one-shot some things, especially with Kyurem and Palkia at some points. Like both these cards are built to one-shot. Using the Star Portal ability, we can kind of set up our board pretty easily. You can use Glacial World, I think is the ability here, to kind of get the energies on board as well. Using Greninja multiple times, which is really cool in my opinion. Quartz as our stadium of choice. Phones to kind of put the energies on top. I like that idea. 1 money to kind of reset the hand. Maybe 1 money could be Roxanne as well, but I guess maybe it's just an early game card as well. And the Wash Energy is a card to put on one of your Kyurems to make sure that the Giratina cannot come up and use the V-Star attack to one-shot it, which is a very cool tech and inclusion that I think will become kind of stable in these decks. Maybe 1 or 2 could even be played in these decks, but obviously you cannot search it out with the Capacious Bucket, so that makes it a little bit worse. Another good stock standard list to familiarize yourself with. You could see Thorntons in some of these lists as well. I could easily see a Thornton being played, but besides that, in a Rod, like Thornton Rod, like some of these cards could be played. Just make sure you know that could happen. Arc Inteleon has a new flavor, but it's the same old friend that we've been used to, playing a thick Inteleon line using our Arceuses, and a new friend, Radiant Gardevoir, giving us the ability to take 20 less damage, and then using Lake Acuity to take 20 more less damage, we can set up these tanks to continue healing over and over and over again until we can use our potential 6 copies of Sharon's Care to close out the game. We have our Big Parasol to ensure that the Giratina V-Star attack doesn't just plow through us, and then we have Big Charm as well to kind of just make sure we can get through that hurdle. Now, using the Big Parasol has to come after they use their Vacuum potentially, but it's kind of like a game of chicken because you have to eventually put it down and maybe path Roxanne, but that all being said, list is very straightforward. The Starmie is there to punish decks that overextend on energies like Kyurem or potentially even Giratina on the board, and even Palkia's. Like any of these decks that can overextend on energies, so many of these can do it now with Mirage Gate, so you can kind of punish them if they get to go a little bit too crazy. But besides that, this is a very cool list. I really like it. I really like Arc Intel and how standard and straightforward it is, and this is a very cool list with the Lake Acuity and the Gardevoir, making it really hard to get knocked out in the mid to late game. The final list in our top 4 is Lost Zone Dialga, and this is Dialga doesn't even thrive off of using the Lost Zone engine, but the raw ability to see 5 cards off the top of your deck and run to that Mirage Gate to pull 2 energies out of your deck is just so irresistible, it looks like. We're going to be able to use the Comfies to get through our deck pretty quickly, using Quick Balls, Ultra Balls, and the Greninja early game to just get to our metals into the discard, get to the Saucers, get to our VIP passes, set up the board, get to the Mirage Gate eventually to potentially use the Greninja with the Waters, or even just pull the Waters out of the deck because Star Chronos only needs 1 colorless energy as well to get to that 220, and with Star Chronos plus Cramorant, we're pretty much putting a lot of damage and pressure on the board. Like, we can start attacking with Cram on those turns we would normally just pass with the Comfy active, or like a Mew active in the old Dialga, so it could be really good. Now, this being said, we have 8 ways to pull energy out of our deck, which is pretty cool. Or sorry, 4 ways to pull it out of our deck and 4 ways to have it on board. But no copies of E-Search and cards of that nature to search out more energy. So these 10 metals are all you get. You should be very careful about lost zoning too many metals. But I don't know how this flows theoretically. And I really like the idea of Thornton to just kind of go into a Dialga out of nowhere. There's no Zacian in this list, but I would have liked to see 1 Zacian maybe. Just because I think having the ability to draw 3 cards would be really strong. But maybe I am just wrong. So anyway, Dialga, another interesting top 4 deck. And we're now hitting our top 8 decks. We see our stock standard Palkia Inteleon. Our good old friend Palkia Inteleon. There is exactly 0 new cards in this list. But if it works, it works, right? Like, Palkia has always been one of those decks where if it works, it works. I don't like 3-eared. I think you need a 4th for sure. And 1 VIP pass is a little bit sketchy for me as well. I've always been a fan of the 4 VIP pass, but this is a heavy capture build. So we're looking to attack with our single prizers significantly more. And kind of put pressure on. But if that's the case, why would we not be playing another card to get the Shady Dealings Inteleon back? Because it's one of our best attackers in that kind of a scenario when we're playing heavy captures. But anyway, I digress. Palkia is still very good. And we jump into our 6th place list, which was Lost Box with a Radiant Zard. Now, the idea is to basically rush to the Crams and the Sableyes, put a bunch of early pressure on the board while you're preparing to get your Radiant Zard up and running. You can do it whenever you want because you have the Clara. And, I mean, it's basically just to end the game with the Radiant Zard, I believe. I guess you can Mirage Gate out, there's no Mirage Gates in this list, so it's just like a speed list trying to get to the Sableye early enough to Lost Mine, put damage on the board, as well as you spit innocently early enough to get the damage there. And then eventually we'll just run into the Zard, and our opponent can't really do much about it because the Zard is just going to take those final 2 prizes. But basically the idea is to Cram turn 1, Cram turn 2, Sableye turn 3, Sableye turn 4, and then basically go turn 5 Zard, turn 6 Zard, and close out the game. Or in some capacity of those attacks, especially using the Clara. And this is a cool idea of just playing the switching cards, the ropes, the nets, the cross switchers, the balloons, just getting as quickly to that lost zone number as you can to make your deck very thin, immutable, and just kind of run through the deck. And Pokestep is a cool tech to deal with stuff like Empoleon, because you need to be able to play cards, right? And almost everything in here is an item, if you've noticed. So the only time we get punished is if we end up pitching too many Pokemon, or we pitch our supporters. Like, if we hit both Clara or something, then it's kind of an issue. But yeah, cool list. I like the idea. Our first Guja list is going to be featuring the Lost Zone engine as well here. 4 VIP Pass, 4 Colress, 4 Comfy. Kind of crazy. 3 Melanie, 1 Roxanne. The whole idea, it looks like we're just going to get to the Gudra, get to the Roaring Iron, and just try to stay alive from there. There's no other healing cards, like no one-off Cheryl. Nothing like that. So I just think we're just going to get there as quickly as possible and just start swinging and kind of hope we don't ever get one-shot, I guess, is the logic here. Interesting. I mean, I feel like something else could fill this Gudra shell pretty well, but I don't know if... I don't know. I want to give it a shot. I'll give it a whirl. I've not really given Gudra too much credit, and I think it's worth trying. I don't know. I haven't given it much credit. And then we have the Arc Gudra to set up our Gudras with the Arceus. This one's playing a little bit more healing. It looks like we have the Radiant Gardevoir. We've got the there's no Cheryl again, or Sharon's Care, which is, again, very interesting. I think a Cheryl would be really good in these decks, just one of. 3 Pokegear to kind of supplement the No Barrel and No Inteleon engine, which I like. 3 copies of Crystal Cave, which helps our healing, and Hyper Potion, which is really good. I think, I mean, having both those cards is like an insta-heal. We're just playing kind of like Arc Duraludon, but without the one-shot potential and the ability. So I don't know if this is better than Arc Duraludon, because you can just kind of play these same cards in Arc Duraludon, and just play the big Parasol anyway, and play the big Charm anyway. You just can't use Melanie, I guess, is the only difference. I don't know. A food for thought. It's an interesting food for thought to see if this, like, replaces Arc Duraludon, or is this, like, just kind of the hot new flavor of the month. Anyway, Goodra is something I've not put too much time into, because I've discounted it greatly, but I think Goodra could be really cool. But that is my early look at Peoria stuff. Tomorrow, whatever I upload this video, I guess I'm going to do it Sunday. So Monday, I'm going to sit down and talk to you guys about what I think will be the top 3, top 5 decks for Peoria, what I would personally put time into in the remainder of the week if you're prepping, and our, like, usual metagame forecast as we move forward. So check that out. It'll be our quick, like, 8 to 10 minutes, as always. And if you enjoy the content, please leave a like and subscribe, and we will be back for more content to get you guys prepared for the Lost Origin format.